Marquez, 18 years old.
Marcial Pérez, 15 años de edad, hermano de José Rosario Pérez.
In the year 2000, the rain and the cold did not bother me, which surprised me because usually they do. But I was just all fired up about this. In the peace movement, sometimes another body makes a difference, and I wanted to be another body there to make that statement that it's just wrong. I'm hoping that the policemen won't tighten the cuffs too tight, because they've been known to do that.
Gervasio Chicas Argueta, son of Juan Chicas, 12 years old. Presente.
Melicio Abueta Alvarenga, 40 years old.
Presente. A child, 4 years old.
Every time that we went down for the November vigil, we were well aware that there was a big risk of being arrested, and we knew the maximum. But we did it anyway. And I think in numbers you felt like, well, you know, you might luck out, you might not be processed.
Well, see, I was the first one to be up for sentencing. And the judge gave quite a lengthy talk, and he said it wasn't just for me, it was for everybody. But then he ended up saying that I would be sentenced to house arrest for 6 months. I guess I was brave enough to say, I appreciate your thoughtfulness, Judge, but I want to get the same sentence as the rest of them. And then he just changed it right off and said 6 months in prison. That was the max.
I deliberately decided not to count the days, although I find myself kind of veering that way sometimes. Every day brings on new challenges here, and it's a very intense place to live, and there's a lot of stress here. I don't recommend prison for any kind of a getaway.
How many times have I been arrested? At the Pentagon in Las Vegas, 3 times in Georgia, and at least 10 times altogether that I can think of offhand, and related to Latin America. You know, I think that when you know something about something, you have to do so, especially if it's, you know, it's really wrong. You've got to do something about it. And I figure, well, if the people who know don't do anything about it, then who's going to? So I just felt like it's for me to do.
I learned about the atrocities in Latin America right after my priest brother, Maryknoll priest brother Ron, was ordained, and he would come home and tell us about things that were happening down there. And he had been trained to go down and fight communism. I don't know if he was actually trained, but that was very much a part of their vision. And he said there were no communists, it was poor and rich. It became so bad fighting with the guerrillas and the army that if the villages were suspect of having fed the guerrillas, which they had to do at their, you know, they'd be killed if they didn't, then the army would come in and wipe out entire villages. They would like tie up the children and the men and the women and take them into a building, pour gasoline on and burn them or shoot them. That was just a pretty common thing to do. In
one instance, I remember there were the children the toddlers and those a little bit bigger. And they didn't have enough fuel, so to start another building. So they tied the children on a rope and pulled them through a burning building to kill them.
All of the countries in Latin America were being affected by military oppression, and still are, many of them.
Attention in the camp. Recount, recount.
This was a village called El Mazote in Central America, and they massacred soldiers massacred the entire village. They ordered people out and told them out of their homes and businesses and told them to lie down on the ground, and then they just machine gunned them. And there was one little girl, one little 7-year-old girl that the soldiers were raping repeatedly all day long. And this little girl was singing this strange little song. And after the soldiers were finished with her, she was still singing this little song. And the soldiers were getting kind of, well, superstitious about the whole thing and wondering what was happening there. And one of them decided to close down the song, so he shot her in the chest. And she kept right on singing. And they shot her again, and the song was a little fainter, but she kept on singing. And finally, somebody took a machete and, you know, killed her that way. The song stopped then.
The thousands of people that have been wiped out, like in Salvador, Guatemala, other areas, they don't have a voice. So we have to be in solidarity. In our interconnected relationship, we have to be the voice for them. And especially when it's our corporate sin, our own country, using the tax monies to hold up and to initiate evils.
You do to other people as you want them to do to you, and that is true. I mean, that's a statement. That's not a command, I believe. That's what we need to do. And it's not because I'm a Roman Catholic nun that I believe that. Sisters have been involved in protests for years and years. This is nothing new.
Back in the 60s, I think my first actual protest, we were invited to a march with Dr. Martin Luther King at Antioch.
15 of us from my community who work with the homeless did civil disobedience at the Pentagon, and that was my first arrest in 1982, 1983.
Well, it was kind of a protest to walk across the United States 9 months of 1986 for peace. When I went to get my ticket to go out to Los Angeles, where the walk started, and she said, "You want a round trip, won't you?" And I said, "No, I'm walking back." I think she thought I was a little crazy.
I think people are kind of like shocked and surprised that women religious are out there on the front and willing to go to prison.
Do you want us to sign it then, or do you want? Yeah, I think at least the 3 of us should sign maybe.
In a sense, why wouldn't we be doing what we're doing? And would that more people would? You know, if you're going to follow the Gospels, you're going to be in solidarity with the poor and try to be a voice for the voiceless. So I don't think we have any choice. And in some senses, I don't want to offend other people, but we're more free in a sense to do things like this than some other people are. I have a whole new lens on life from having to live in prison, experiencing the system. Probably the oasis here at Pekin is the women and how they support one another.
You know, it just shows me that you can make community wherever you are, that people are basically good, and people here have made a mistake, and so, you know, who hasn't?
The other women in prison here have been just very wonderful to us. Very friendly. They're nice ladies.
Attention, attention. Nikki Baker to the admin building. Baker to the admin building.
And not a threat to society at all, I don't think. There are different levels of humanity among the guards, I'd say.
One guard, he said, we were no better than rapists and murderers because we decided which rules we would break and which laws we would keep. Prison is no picnic to be in, but I could take it. It cost some, health-wise. I'm not as strong as I was when I went in. I have what's called familial palsy. I have a tremor in my hands, but it's noticeably worse now. But that's part of the price to pay, I think. And I'm going to go downhill anyway because of my age, so might as well go downhill flailing and screaming. So.
Dorothy and I, we shared a cell up until the end of August. And when she got sick, you couldn't even get the ear of the meds. I mean, they really were really ugly, mean. And finally, this one guard, Mr. Wallace, was very compassionate, and he said, I'll bring the nurse over. So this young male nurse came over, and he took her pulse. And he said, well, you can't see a doctor. This is Friday, and we can't see a doctor until Monday because everything's closed down on the weekend. So in other words, they were saying to us, this is a work camp, and you got to be healthy here and whatever. And she was healthy, and she was working up until that time. Of course, we missed her, but it was a real relief that she finally got out, because we didn't have any power to help her get to medical help.
I had a cough that sounded awful after a cold, and I was kind of used to having awful sounding coughs. I didn't even think anything of it, but it was still kind of a shock when they called me over and said we're leaving for Dubuque in a few minutes. Now I'm at Elm Street, which is a community corrections house, which has now developed into kind of a halfway house for people out of prison, for some people. I was on the board when we built that place. That's ironic that I'd go back as an inmate, but that's what I did. You know, really seeing prison from the inside, I think, was a good experience, an enlightening experience. So I'm not really sorry that I went to prison. I'm supposed to be doing 8 hours of community service a day, and that is up here at Mount St. Francis Center. Nobody's really checking up on me much, but they do check to see that I haven't run away once a week. They suggested up here that I might like to go and visit the people in our infirmary, which of course I like to do too.
She's my best friend. Now how come they let you out from down there?
Well, they said my health wasn't good. No, I'm not real sure about that, but I guess I had a touch of pneumonia. So I was here a full month, you know, remember?
Yes.
All right. All these
Do you have any others?
1,000 letters, all your affirmations. Way to go. I tell you. Something else.
Oh, good. Woo!
That's right.
There you go. All right. Oh, you're ready to go. Good.
I'm more than ready.
You're more than ready.
Well, it was happiness and relief. Good to be home, and just grateful that I was able to still walk and be and whatever after the 6 months. Well, there's no question that what we did was pretty minuscule compared to the price that people have had to pay with their lives, or their kids' lives, or their loved ones. Our guards didn't wear guns, and they didn't beat us over the head with billy clubs, and we could go outside. So when you put it in perspective, that's what gave you strength. I think every one of us is called to do a bit part. And together we can make a tremendous difference if everybody does something.
I want my life to be worth something. And this is something I can do in retirement age, and I want to do things as long as I can do them.
I've been really well. Good. Thank you. And I'm so glad that you're home. Great. When did you return?
Day before yesterday.
And you're out here.
Yeah. Right. It's great to be here.
Good. Good.
5 years old, 2.5 years old, and 7 months old.
Locario Díaz Márquez, 18 years old.
Marcial Pérez, 15 años de edad, hermano de José Rosario Pérez.
Luciano Chico Sargueta, son of Juan Chicas, 15 years old.
Elvira Claros, 35 years old.
Eugenia Díaz Márquez, 14